We're gonna get going, everybody. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The roll call, please, Sue.
Mr. Kane?
Here.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Coyne?
Here.
Mr. Bova?
Here.
Ms. Sesney?
Here.
Dave Core?
Yes, that's what you call me.
Oh, no. Mr. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Brodsky? And Mr. Matola?
Thank you. You have the draft February 12, 2018 minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Thanks, Dave. A second? Thanks, Bruce. Any comments, corrections, deletions, additions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. You haven't just been handed out the first quarter investment statement ending March 31, 2018, Jim?
Yes. This is the first quarter of the new year. Public authorities law requires that we provide you with a quarterly statement of our investments and the earnings and the expenses related to those investments. We just had a few months ago, we had the year end, and so this is the first quarter. There aren't any major changes from the last quarter.
Any questions for Jim? We need a motion to accept. Bruce, thanks. A second. Thanks, Denny. Any further comments, concerns, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Anything on the financials, Jim?
Consumption is above budget. Our billings for the first quarter are above last year, so we're looking pretty good. And we're recovering our cash flow. We have a lot of outlays in January and February, so we'll catch up over the months.
Any questions for Jim regarding the financials? Thank you. That gets us right through the committees. Pat?
Well, that's quick. Couple things I want to bring up to date on. You may be aware that we're scheduled to receive $2.3 million from Empire State Development for work on our raw water transmission lines from the treatment plant back to the reservoir. They had an extensive list of requirements and documents we have to turn in as part of this application process. We have most of that together. The rest we should be finishing up this week. So hopefully that'll be deemed complete and we'll be able to start the process of obtaining the funds. In the meantime, Dick has finally received all the approvals necessary from Brookfield Power to get on there right away and begin scoping out what we need to do for the rest of the bridge project. Seems like we're finally moving forward. Lost about 9 months in the process, essentially an entire construction season, but we are moving ahead. Dick has also informed me that we have awarded our paving contract for street repairs and are working very closely with all the towns, City of Utica, on what their needs are, the city paving plan as well. We're going to be doing a water main replacement project in conjunction with one of the streets they're going to be redoing. But we're out doing leak detection ahead of time, so we're going to try to figure out where everything is so that we can fix what needs to be fixed before they pave the streets. So we'll try to stay on top of that. Last week, there were 2 conferences, one up in Saratoga, which was the statewide American Water Works Association chapter. We had great presence. Phil Tangora, our water quality director, gave 2 excellent presentations up there on our businesses with Suez running our treatment plant, and also on the actual treatment process itself. Very informative, very well received, great audiences. Later in the week, Dick gave a presentation at the American Public Works Association state chapter meeting down in Buffalo on system resiliency and some of the more innovative techniques that we're doing here to make the system as efficient as we can get it operating. Last thing I wanted to mention is that we had been studying the possibility of switching from what we call virgin granular activated carbon at the treatment plant. Fresh carbon every year was costing us nearly $1 million a year, well in excess of $900,000. We were looking at the possibility of being able to use regenerated carbon which is essentially the used carbon from a plant, put black in a blast furnace, and burning out everything that's clogs up all the pores. And I'm going to let Phil share the good news with you because he's been spearheading that research. So, Phil?
Yeah, so the first talk that I gave last week in Saratoga was about the regenerated GAC, and we were happy to report there and as well here that the DOH has given us approval via email at this point to move forward with that. So if we're able to get this installed in July, which we don't anticipate why we wouldn't be able to, it's going to result in like a almost $250,000 savings for the water authority. Now, that was built into the contract with Suez, but of course that savings, because we had set up this project well ahead of the contract negotiations, that money all gets returned to the authority. Yeah.
Very good.
So with a little luck, we'll have pretty good budgetary savings moving forward. And we'll see how it runs. Mark. You can pilot it if it works well.
Department of Health.
Then there'd be probably no reason to ever switch back if it works well.
Yeah, and we'll have the opportunity to have swing loads where we can alternate years and they can pull out the current years, have it regenerated and store it, and then bring it back in alternate years. So we have an opportunity for multiple year contracts for an additional savings.
Last thing I'll mention is I also had said I was going to be at a conference in Washington, D.C., which is the AMWA, another organization, part of the Alphabet Soup, Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies, and this they do every spring in D.C. where we hear from legislators on and EPA administrators on what's coming next. And unfortunately, right now, nobody knows just yet what's going to happen with the revisions coming for the lead and copper rule. So they may say the action level could be at 0, and therefore you have to remove all of your lead services that might become mandated. We still don't know yet. The current action level is at 15 parts per billion, but it's not. It's just an action level to do something with a lead service, but it's not necessarily a medical level that indicates what a human person can tolerate in exposure. So there's a disconnect between the medical science and the action level, and that's, I think, why it's taken so long with Congress to try to iron that out and reconcile those differences. So at some point, I would imagine in the next few months, is that what you guys are hearing too? We might be getting the new lead and copper rule, and then we'll find out if we're going to be forced to replace all of our lead services or some portion of them on an annual basis.
It's anticipated that the revisions be released by the end of the calendar year, but there's a lot going on at EPA right now, so not quite sure if they'll meet that deadline.
Yes.
Is there any, has any survey been done or any analysis been done as to where is lead, either in our control or in customer control, and what volume and?
We have a pretty good level of confidence in our records as far as where we think the lead services are.
We started actively denoting that in the customer service record about almost a year and a half ago now. So we're getting, as a meter installer goes into a home and identifies, or if we go in to take a sample for water quality issue, if we can just verify the service type, we put that in the customer record, and then we can build that database. So should we have to go down the road and replace lead services, we know where to
Do
start.
we know the percentage, what percentage have been determined so far of the 37,000?
No, I mean, at this point, we could really only estimate that we have a couple thousand lead services, where, but it takes, quite an effort. And we've talked about maybe looking at some other ways to perhaps have the customers help us in identifying their service type for us.
Our latest guess is somewhere around 3,500 of non systems. We think we know where most of them are.
If you have a, if you can put together some sort of proposal as to what it would take to create that inventory over a period of, let's say, 2 years, you might be able to look for funding, temporary funding, part-time funding, temporary funds, state grant, maybe even some other funding sources that would fund something like that to do that inventory.
And I should mention too, while I was in DC at that conference, I did meet with Congresswoman Tenney and gave her a couple of issues that we're dealing with, where any opportunity, there's a federal infrastructure fund to put a marker in to try to get us some funding, so. And, you know, obviously she said she would do what she could for us. It just depends whether there's gonna be a federal pot created or not. And that's, at this point, up in the air as well. So, that's all I have for now, unless there's any questions anybody has of me or.
Questions for Pat?
Do our records, Ben, show when people signed up for the original water for that property? Because you can go by that too, because after certain, you know, the older ones all have like,
Right.
you know,
All the tab cards are digitized, but I don't know at this point if it shows the date that the service was actually installed. You know, you can look at the housing code and look at the age of the house.
yeah.
But, you know, even that was hit and miss because the last few years in the 30s, some were lead, some weren't. So the age isn't necessarily a defining factor. You really need to just get in and inspect it to see what's down there. And then there are some where we've done our side, but the customer didn't do their
Right.
side, or vice versa.
Yeah, we know ours.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, as far as the project at Brookfield, is that going to be done this year then?
Well, it depends how forceful Dick can be with him.
We're gonna get these soils worked on this. We're just getting up there now to do our boring so we can do the foundation work. We hope to get the foundation design maybe in by the end of the year. The bridge is a pre-engineered bridge. It's actually built in a factory. So we can get our foundations and our pipe work done this year. That's reasonable, given if the weather's good enough and we can get started here pretty quick. The snow's now gone. And then they have the bridge built over the winter and set in the spring, first thing the following year. That's kind of the schedule we're looking at this point.
All right, thank you.
Anything else, Pat? Any old business? Any new business? We need a motion to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation and current litigation with our attorney. Vince? A second, thanks. Any discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.